Picture this: a dark stone-walled chamber, the air thick with the smell of old parchment and fear. A single torch flickers, casting long, dancing shadows. In the center, a man in black robes holds a document, his face grim. This is the image that springs to mind when we hear the Spanish Inquisition, a symbol of terror, torture, and religious fanaticism that has haunted the popular imagination for centuries. But what if I told you that much of what we think we know is a caricature, a distorted legend crafted by Spain's enemies? What if the reality, while still grim, was far more complex and, in some ways, even more fascinating than the myth? Let's pull back the curtain of time and uncover the true story of the Spanish Inquisition, separating the chilling facts from the elaborate fiction. In the late 15th century, Spain was not yet a single unified country. The Iberian Peninsula was a patchwork of kingdoms, and for centuries Christians, Muslims, and Jews had coexisted in a delicate, often fraught balance. This period, known as the Convivencia, was coming to a violent end. In 1492, two monumental events occurred: the final Christian victory over the last Muslim kingdom in Granada, and the infamous Alhambra Decree, which gave Spain's Jewish population a terrible choice: convert to Catholicism or leave forever. Thousands converted, becoming known as conversos. But old suspicions died hard. Many old Christians believed these conversions were insincere, that the conversos were secretly practicing Judaism. This deep-seated paranoia created a perceived threat to the religious unity that the monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, were so desperate to forge for their new Spain. Their solution? A state-controlled tribunal with the power to investigate and purify the faith of their subjects. In 1478, with the Pope's reluctant approval, the Tribunal of the Holy Office of the Inquisition was born. Unlike other Inquisitions which were controlled by the Pope, the Spanish Inquisition was a tool of the crown. Its primary target wasn't witches or heretics in the traditional sense, but these conversos. The goal was to enforce religious orthodoxy. So, how did it actually work? When the Inquisition arrived in a town, it would announce a grace period. This was a window, typically 30 to 40 days, for people to come forward and confess their heretical acts without severe penalty. This created a climate of suspicion, turning neighbors against neighbors. People confessed to everything from not eating pork to changing their bed sheets on a Friday, all seen as potential signs of secret Jewish observance. Once the grace period ended, the accusations began. Anonymous testimony was accepted, and the accused was often not told who their accusers were. They would be arrested, their property seized to pay for their own imprisonment and trial, and then the questioning would begin. Now let's talk about the infamous torture chambers. The black legend, propaganda spread by Spain's Protestant rivals, painted a picture of sadistic torture being a daily routine. The reality is more nuanced. The Inquisition did use torture, but it was regulated and, ironically, less frequent and less brutal than in the secular courts of the time. Torture was a last resort, used to extract a confession when there was already significant evidence of guilt. Three main methods were common: the potro, or rack, the toca, a form of waterboarding, and the garrucha, where the victim was hoisted to the ceiling by their wrists and then dropped. Horrifying, yes, but the goal wasn't to kill, but to confess. A confession, even one extracted under duress, was the key. Once confessed, the accused could be reconciled with the church. The final act of this grim theater was the auto da fe, or act of faith. This was not a mass burning as is often depicted. It was a grand public ceremony, a piece of political and religious pageantry. Prisoners wearing penitential garments called sanbenitos, decorated with symbols of their crimes, were paraded through the streets. Their sentences were read aloud to the entire town. Punishments ranged from fines and public shaming to imprisonment. The most severe sentence reserved for unrepentant heretics or those who relapsed was relaxation to the secular arm. This was a euphemism. It meant the Inquisition, which was forbidden from killing, was handing the condemned over to the state authorities to be burned at the stake. While historians estimate that around 3,000 to 5,000 people were executed over the Inquisition's 350-year history, the vast majority of the accused were not burned. The true power of the Inquisition wasn't just in execution, but in the social and psychological control it exerted through public shame and the ever-present fear of accusation. Over the centuries, the Inquisition's focus shifted. After the initial wave against conversos, it turned its attention to Moriscos, converted Muslims, and later to Protestantism, which it successfully stamped out in Spain. It also became a censor of books and ideas, shaping Spain's intellectual climate for generations and isolating it from the scientific and philosophical revolutions happening in the rest of Europe. By the 18th century, the Enlightenment's ideals of reason and tolerance began to chip away at its authority. The once feared tribunal became a shadow of its former self, seen as a backward relic of a darker time. After a long, slow decline, the Spanish Inquisition was finally, definitively abolished in 1834. The story of the Spanish Inquisition is a powerful reminder of the dangers of intolerance and the abuse of power in the name of purity. While the Black legend exaggerated its horrors for political gain, the reality was a system that thrived on suspicion, destroyed lives, and stifled a nation's intellectual growth for centuries. It's a complex, dark chapter in history, where the lines between faith, power, and fear became terrifyingly blurred. By understanding the reality behind the myth, we can better appreciate the forces that shaped our modern world. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If you found this exploration of history compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives. See you next time.